He wasn't supposed to bark. Not today. Not here. Not in front of 200 grieving people gathered beneath the stained glass windows of St. Matthew's Church in Cedar Ridge, Colorado. The morning air carried the scent of pine and fresh rain drifting in through the open doors, mingling with polished wood, candle wax, and the faint perfume of lilies arranged around a flag-draped coffin at the front of the sanctuary. Every seat was filled. Police officers stood shoulder to shoulder in pressed uniforms. Families sat quietly with heads bowed. The organ played softly somewhere in the background, its notes floating through the room like distant memories. At the center of it all rested Officer Ethan Walker, 41 years old, respected, trusted, gone too soon. Beside the coffin sat Rex, Ethan's German Shepherd partner, 7 years old, black and tan coat brushed and spotless for the ceremony. A silver canine badge attached to his collar caught the light whenever he moved. But he barely moved at all. He simply stared. For nearly 30 minutes, the dog remained perfectly still. No whining, no passing, no restless shifting, just silent watchfulness. The kind that made people uncomfortable. The kind that felt almost human. Several officers exchanged glances. They expected grief. They expected confusion. They expected a loyal dog searching for a familiar voice that would never answer again. What they did not expect was what happened next. The pastor stepped toward the podium and opened his notes. A hush settled across the sanctuary. Outside, a distant roll of thunder echoed beyond the mountains. Inside, every eye focused forward. Then Rex stood, slowly at first. His ears lifted, his body stiffened. His amber eyes locked onto the coffin. The change was immediate, sharp, like a switch had been flipped somewhere deep inside him. A low sound rumbled from his chest. Several officers looked down. One of Ethan's closest friends, Sergeant Daniel Brooks, tightened his grip on the leash. "Easy, boy," he whispered. Rex ignored him. The growl deepened. Not aggressive, not fearful, focused, intent. Then suddenly the German shepherd lunged forward. Gasps swept through the church. Daniel stumbled a step as the dog pulled hard toward the coffin. The leash strained. Chairs scraped. Conversations died instantly. Rex barked once, loud enough to shake the silence apart. Then again, and again. The sound echoed against the church walls, sharp and urgent. People froze in disbelief. The dog planted his front paws against the base of the coffin and barked relentlessly. Not at the crowd, not at the pastor, not at the officers surrounding him. At one specific place, the left side, near the center, as though something there demanded his attention. Daniel tried to pull him back. 2 more officers stepped forward to help, but Rex refused to move. His claws scraped against the polished wood floor. His eyes never left the coffin. Then something even stranger happened. The dog suddenly stopped barking. The church fell silent once more. Rex lowered his head, took a long breath, and stared at the exact same spot, his entire body trembling, as if he recognized something no one else could see. And in that moment, while every person inside the sanctuary struggled to understand what they were witnessing, one unsettling thought quietly entered the room. What if Rex wasn't mourning Ethan at all? What if he was trying to tell them something? Long before the silence of St. Matthew's Church, before the folded flag and the rows of mourning officers, there was a cold October morning at the Cedar Ridge Police Department when Ethan Walker first met Rex. A pale sunrise stretched across the Rocky Mountain horizon, painting the training grounds in soft gold while frost clung to the chain-link fences and empty agility courses. Ethan had arrived early, coffee steaming in one hand, duty bag slung over his shoulder. At 41, he carried himself with the calm confidence of a man who had spent 2 decades serving others. His dark brown hair showed traces of gray at the temples, and the lines around his eyes hinted at years of long shifts and sleepless nights. He lived alone in a modest house on the edge of town. His wife, Emily, had passed away from illness 6 years earlier, leaving behind a silence that no amount of work could fully fill. Most people assumed Ethan preferred being alone. The truth was more complicated. Some losses simply become part of a person. That morning, the canine unit director led him toward a fenced training yard. Several German shepherds moved through exercises with handlers, but one dog immediately stood apart from the others. He sat quietly beneath a cottonwood tree, watching everything. Alert, patient, unusually still. His coat gleamed black and tan beneath the morning sun, and his amber eyes seemed to study every movement with remarkable focus. "That is Rex," the director said. "Smartest dog we have seen in years. But he only trusts a few people." Ethan crouched slowly near the fence. Rex did not approach. He simply watched. Seconds passed, then a minute. Neither moved. Finally, Ethan smiled. "You do not have to impress me, buddy." The dog tilted his head slightly. The director laughed. "Most of them run straight to a new handler." Ethan stood and turned away. Maybe he is still deciding. As he started walking toward the gate, he heard soft footsteps behind him. He glanced back. Rex had crossed the yard and stopped at his side. Not in front, not behind, beside him. The director stared in disbelief. "Well," he said quietly, "I guess he made his choice." From that day forward, they became inseparable. They trained together through rain, snow, and summer heat. Ethan learned every subtle movement of Rex's ears, every shift in posture, every signal hidden behind those intelligent eyes. Rex learned Ethan's routines, his voice, and even his moods. During difficult days, when memories of Emily surfaced unexpectedly, the German shepherd would rest his head against Ethan's knee without being asked. No commands, no training, just quiet understanding. Over the next 7 years, the people of Cedar Ridge grew accustomed to seeing them together. Children waved at Rex during school visits. Shop owners kept dog treats behind counters. Elderly residents smiled whenever Ethan and his partner walked downtown patrol routes. Somewhere along the way, the officer and the dog stopped being viewed as separate individuals. They became a team, a fixture of the town itself. And perhaps that was why nobody in Cedar Ridge could imagine one without the other. Nobody except Rex, who seemed to understand long before anyone else that some stories do not stay whole forever. The last shift began like dozens before it. The sky above Cedar Ridge glowed pale blue as early winter sunlight spilled across the streets, reflecting off storefront windows and patches of frost that still clung to the sidewalks. Ethan Walker arrived at the station just after 6 in the morning, carrying a paper cup of black coffee, while Rex trotted beside him with the calm confidence of a veteran partner. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing hinted that the day would become the one everyone would remember. Officers exchanged greetings. Dispatch radios crackled softly. The familiar scent of coffee, printer ink, and cold air drifted through the building. Ethan knelt beside Rex before briefing. He adjusted the German shepherd's collar and rubbed behind his ears. The dog leaned into the touch for a moment before returning to attention. Several younger officers smiled. They had seen the ritual hundreds of times. Around mid-morning, a call came through requesting assistance with a developing investigation connected to suspicious activity near an abandoned warehouse district on the edge of town. It was not considered dangerous, not urgent, just another assignment among many. Ethan gathered his gear, clipped Rex's lead into place, and headed out. The drive took them beyond the neighborhoods and into an industrial section where old brick buildings stood silent beneath drifting clouds. The area smelled faintly of dust, wet concrete, and machine oil left behind by businesses long gone. Ethan parked and stepped out. Rex immediately became alert. His ears lifted. His nose tested the air. Something had caught his attention. Not enough to alarm anyone, just enough for Ethan to notice. "What is it, buddy?" he asked quietly. The dog remained focused on the distant buildings. Hours passed. Reports were filed. Witnesses were interviewed. The investigation continued without incident. Yet several people later recalled something strange. Rex never fully relaxed that day. He obeyed every command, performed every task perfectly, but there was a tension in him, a watchfulness, as though he sensed a detail no one else could see. Late that afternoon, clouds rolled over the mountains and the temperature dropped sharply. A cold wind swept through Cedar Ridge. At 5:23 in the evening, A transmission came across police radios requesting additional support at the warehouse district. Officers responded immediately. Communication became brief and fragmented. Then silence. The kind of silence dispatchers hate most. Minutes stretched. Calls went unanswered. Vehicles were sent. Supervisors were notified. Darkness settled over the town. Residents noticed flashing lights in the distance, but knew little else. Inside the station, concern slowly turned into dread. Shortly after 7 o'clock, word arrived. Ethan Walker would not be returning home. The news moved through Cedar Ridge like a winter storm. Businesses closed early. Porch lights stayed on long after midnight. Neighbors gathered quietly. Some cried openly. Others simply stared into the darkness, struggling to believe it. Through it all, one detail stayed with everyone who witnessed it. When officers finally brought Rex back to the station that night, the German Shepherd did not look frightened. He did not look confused. He looked determined. His amber eyes searched every face that entered the room, every hallway, every doorway, as though he was looking for something or someone. And deep beneath the grief settling over the town, the dog seemed unwilling to accept that the story was over. The days following Ethan Walker's passing settled over Cedar Ridge like a long winter shadow. Snow had not yet arrived, but the air carried that familiar stillness that comes before the season changes. Flags throughout town remained lowered. Flowers appeared outside the police department entrance. Handwritten cards filled with prayers and memories covered a table near the lobby. People came from neighboring counties simply to pay their respects. Yet inside the canine unit, something felt unfinished. Rex no longer followed his normal routine. Every morning, he was brought to the station by Sergeant Daniel Brooks, and every morning he walked directly to Ethan's empty office. The room remained untouched. A framed photograph of Ethan and Emily still rested on the bookshelf. His favorite coffee mug sat beside a stack of reports. His winter jacket remained hanging behind the door. Rex would enter quietly, circle once, and lie down beside the desk. Then he would wait. Hours sometimes passed that way. He ignored toys. He ignored treats. He barely reacted to visitors. The German Shepherd simply watched the doorway, as though expecting familiar footsteps to appear at any moment. The officers who knew him best found the behavior heartbreaking. But after several days, they began noticing something stranger. Rex was not searching for Ethan, at least not in the way grieving dogs usually do. Instead, he seemed focused on something else entirely. During walks around the station, he would suddenly stop and lift his head into the air. His ears would rotate forward. His nose would twitch. Then he would begin scanning the area with intense concentration. Not confused, not lost, alert, like a detective following a trail no one else could see. One afternoon, Daniel brought him to Ethan's house so arrangements could be made for personal belongings. The small home sat beneath tall pine trees at the edge of town. The front porch remained exactly as Ethan had left it. Wind chimes swayed softly above the railing, while dry leaves skittered across the driveway. When the door opened, Rex rushed inside. Daniel expected him to run toward the bedroom or living room. Instead, the dog moved carefully from room to room, sniffing with unusual focus. He paused near Ethan's recliner, then the kitchen table, then the mudroom where Ethan kept his patrol gear. Finally, he stopped beside a wooden cabinet near the front door. His posture stiffened. His nose remained pressed against the wood. Daniel frowned. "What is it, buddy?" Rex looked up briefly, then returned to the same spot. Again and again. The behavior continued for nearly 10 minutes. Daniel opened the cabinet. Inside were ordinary items. Flashlights, gloves, a folded blanket. Nothing unusual. Yet Rex remained convinced something mattered there. That evening, back at the station, another odd detail emerged. Officers reviewing old security footage noticed that Rex had displayed the same behavior during the final week before Ethan's death. Several times, he had paused near Ethan's patrol vehicle and stared toward the industrial district where the last investigation took place. At the time, nobody thought much of it. Now the footage felt different, unsettling, as if pieces of a puzzle were quietly gathering beneath the surface. Then came the night before the funeral. Long after most employees had gone home, Rex suddenly became restless. He paced the hallway outside evidence storage. He stopped, listened, then turned toward a photograph hanging on the wall. It showed Ethan smiling beside him during a community event years earlier. The German shepherd sat down beneath the frame and stared at it for nearly an hour. Daniel watched from across the room, unable to shake a feeling he could not explain. Because for the first time since Ethan was gone, Rex did not look like a dog consumed by grief. He looked like a dog trying desperately to remember something important. The funeral should have ended the questions. Instead, it created new ones. By late afternoon, the video from St. Matthew's Church had already been reviewed half a dozen times inside the Cedar Ridge Police Department. Officers gathered around a conference room monitor while rain tapped softly against the windows. The footage showed the same moment from different angles. Rex lunging toward the coffin. Rex barking. Rex refusing to back away. At first it looked like grief. Then Sergeant Daniel Brooks noticed something everyone else had missed. "Pause it right there," he said quietly. The image froze. The room fell silent. Rex was not focused on the entire coffin. His attention remained fixed on one precise location. The same location every single time. Daniel leaned forward. "Zoom in." The technician enlarged the frame. The picture became grainy, but the pattern remained obvious. Every bark, every movement, every stare, directed toward the left side near the center. Not random, not emotional chaos. Deliberate. A retired K-9 trainer named Walter Green happened to be present that afternoon. He had worked with police dogs for nearly 30 years and rarely spoke unless necessary. He watched the footage twice before folding his arms. "That dog is indicating something," he said. Several officers exchanged uncertain looks. "Indicating what?" someone asked. Walter shook his head slowly. "I do not know, but I know what I'm looking at. That is not mourning behavior." The statement settled heavily over the room. Outside, the clouds darkened. Inside, a quiet discomfort spread among the people who had known Ethan best. Because if Walter was right, then Rex had been trying to communicate something during the funeral. Something specific. Something important. The following morning, Daniel could not stop thinking about it. He drove to the evidence warehouse where several items connected to the final investigation remained stored. Rex accompanied him. The German shepherd stepped from the vehicle and immediately became alert. His nose lifted into the cold air. The warehouse district looked different now. Empty loading docks stretched beneath gray skies. Wind rattled loose metal signs. A freight train horn echoed somewhere in the distance. Daniel walked slowly. Rex stayed close. Then suddenly the dog stopped. His ears rose. His body became rigid. He turned toward an old parking area across the street and stared. Daniel followed his gaze. Nothing appeared unusual. Just cracked pavement and abandoned buildings. Yet Rex remained fixed on the spot. After nearly a minute, the dog lowered his nose and began tracking a scent trail across the edge of the lot. Not excited, not frantic, focused, purposeful. Daniel's pulse quickened. The trail led only a short distance before disappearing near a section of fencing exposed to days of weather. Rex searched the ground repeatedly before finally sitting. The signal was unmistakable. He had reached the end of something. Daniel looked around. Still nothing. Yet a strange feeling lingered. Later that evening, back at the station, he opened Ethan's final case file once more. Most of it contained routine reports, witness interviews, patrol notes, standard paperwork. Then he noticed a handwritten page tucked near the back. A note Ethan had written 2 days before his death. Only one sentence was underlined. Daniel read it twice, then a third time. The words were simple, but suddenly they made Rex's behavior feel far less mysterious. Ethan had written, "Sometimes the smallest detail is the one everybody ignores." The sentence stayed with Daniel Brooks all night. Sometimes the smallest detail is the one everybody ignores. He sat alone inside Ethan Walker's office while snow clouds gathered beyond the station windows. The desk lamp cast a warm circle of light across old case files, photographs, and handwritten notes. Everything felt frozen in time. Ethan's jacket still hung behind the door. His patrol cap remained on the shelf, exactly where he had left it. Even now, the room carried the faint scent of coffee and cedar aftershave. Across the floor, Rex rested quietly beside the desk. At least he appeared to be resting. Every few minutes his ears would twitch toward some distant sound. Every so often he would lift his head and stare at the same file lying open in front of Daniel. Near midnight, Daniel finally decided to review every report connected to Ethan's final investigation from the beginning. Not because he believed there was a conspiracy, not because he doubted the conclusions, simply because Rex refused to let the matter go. Page after page revealed nothing unusual. Routine interviews, security checks, property records, dispatch logs. Then Daniel noticed something strange. One warehouse listed in the reports appeared repeatedly despite having no direct connection to the investigation. The address surfaced in witness statements, vehicle logs, and patrol notes. Never prominently, always in passing. Small details, easy to overlook. The exact kind of detail Ethan would have circled. The next morning, Daniel drove back to the industrial district. Rex accompanied him. Frost coated the empty parking lots. The wind carried the scent of approaching snow through rows of abandoned buildings. The warehouse stood near the edge of the district, surrounded by chain-link fencing and overgrown weeds. It looked ordinary, forgotten. Yet the moment Rex stepped out of the vehicle, his entire posture changed. His ears rose. His nose lifted. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. The German shepherd moved forward with steady determination. Not rushing, not wandering, tracking. He followed the fence line until reaching a side entrance hidden from the main road. There he stopped. Daniel examined the area. At first he saw nothing unusual. Then sunlight broke through the clouds and reflected off something lodged between cracks in the concrete. He crouched. A small metallic object rested near the base of the fence. Weathered, almost invisible, it appeared insignificant enough that hundreds of people could have walked past without noticing it. Daniel picked it up carefully. The object was attached to a worn key ring. Hanging from was a tiny silver charm shaped like a mountain peak. Daniel froze. He recognized it instantly. Months earlier, Ethan had mentioned seeing the same charm during an interview connected to the case. At the time, it seemed meaningless. Just another random detail. Yet somehow Ethan remembered it, and now Rex had led him directly to it. The German shepherd sat beside the fence and stared toward the warehouse entrance. Silent, unmoving. Daniel looked from the charm to the dog, then back toward the building. A cold breeze swept across the empty lot. For the first time, he felt certain of one thing. Rex had not been searching for Ethan. He had been following Ethan's trail, and that trail was still leading somewhere. Daniel Brooks returned to the station carrying the small silver charm in his pocket, but it felt heavier than metal. Snow began falling over Cedar Ridge that evening, dusting rooftops and quiet streets in white. Christmas lights had started appearing around town, yet the season felt strangely muted. Inside the department, most people were trying to move forward. Reports had been finalized. Ceremonies had ended. Officially, the story was over. Only Daniel and Rex seemed unable to let it rest. The next morning, Daniel requested access to archived interview recordings connected to Ethan Walker's final investigation. Hours passed as he sat in a dim records room reviewing footage on an aging computer monitor. Witness after witness appeared on the screen. Delivery, drivers, property managers, security guards. Most offered nothing unusual. Then one interview caught his attention. A maintenance contractor named Trevor Hale mentioned seeing a man near the warehouse district several times during the week before Ethan's death. The statement had been noted, but never followed up because the description was vague. Daniel listened again. The man had worn a dark jacket and carried a ring of keys with a silver mountain charm attached. Daniel immediately reached into his pocket and stared at the object Rex had helped uncover. His heart began to pound. It could not be a coincidence. Across the room, Rex lifted his head from the floor as if sensing the change. Daniel replayed the recording 3 more times. Each time the same detail stood out. The charm, the tiny mountain, the forgotten clue. Later that afternoon, another piece fell into place. Department vehicle logs showed that one officer had been assigned near the industrial district several times during the same period. Officer Grant Mercer, 46 years old, respected, experienced, quiet. Daniel knew him well. Everyone did. Mercer had even spoken at Ethan's memorial service. Nothing about him had ever raised suspicion. Yet when Daniel compared schedules, witness statements, and patrol routes, a troubling pattern emerged. Mercer seemed to appear around the edges of multiple events connected to the case. Never directly involved. Always nearby. The discovery alone proved nothing. Still, Daniel could not ignore it. That evening, while most of the station emptied, Mercer unexpectedly stopped by Ethan's old office. Daniel was inside sorting files. Rex lay beneath the desk. The moment Mercer stepped through the doorway, the German Shepherd stood. His ears snapped forward. Every muscle in his body tightened. Daniel froze. Rex did not bark. He did not growl. He simply stared. The same intense stare Daniel had seen at the funeral. Mercer hesitated, only for a fraction of a second. Then he smiled politely. "Still going through Ethan's paperwork?" he asked. "Trying to keep his cases organized," Daniel replied. Mercer nodded. His eyes drifted briefly across the desk before he turned toward the door. "Good man," he said quietly. "He deserved better." Then he left. The hallway fell silent. Daniel looked down. Rex remained standing, eyes fixed on the doorway, long after Mercer disappeared from view. The German Shepherd slowly lowered his nose toward the floor. He inhaled once. Then he walked to Ethan's desk and stopped beside a framed photograph showing Ethan, Daniel, and Mercer together during a charity event years earlier. Rex stared at the picture. Then he looked back toward the empty hallway. In that moment, Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air outside. Because for the first time, the trail Ethan left behind seemed to be pointing towards someone the department trusted completely. The storm arrived overnight. By dawn, Cedar Ridge sat beneath 6 inches of fresh snow, the streets softened by white silence, and the glow of porch lights reflecting against low gray clouds. Inside the police department, however, nothing felt peaceful. Daniel Brooks had spent the entire night comparing records, schedules, and reports. The deeper he looked, the more uncomfortable the picture became. Small inconsistencies appeared everywhere. Minor details. Forgotten details. The kind Ethan Walker had always noticed. A patrol log entered at the wrong time. A witness interview filed days late. Vehicle records that placed Grant Mercer near locations he never mentioned in official reports. None of it proved wrongdoing. Yet together, they formed a pattern that refused to disappear. Across the room, Rex remained awake. The German Shepherd had barely slept for days. Every time Daniel reached a new discovery, the dog seemed to sense it before a word was spoken. Late that morning, Daniel met privately with Police Chief Harold Bennett. Snow drifted beyond the office windows while Daniel carefully laid out everything he had found. The charm, the warehouse, the overlooked witness statement, the patrol logs. Chief Bennett listened without interruption. When Daniel finished, the older man remained silent for a long moment. Finally, he stood and walked to the window. "Ethan was one of the best officers I ever worked with," he said quietly. "If there is something we missed, we owe it to him to find it." Within hours, an internal review was authorized. Additional investigators were assigned. Old evidence was re-examined. Archived communications were reviewed. What followed surprised everyone. Information that once appeared unrelated suddenly connected. Witnesses remembered details they had dismissed months earlier. Records revealed conversations that had never been fully documented. A clearer picture slowly emerged. By the end of the week, the department announced that Ethan's final investigation would be formally reopened. News spread quickly through Cedar Ridge. Residents who had mourned Ethan now watched events unfold with growing disbelief. Questions replaced assumptions. Doubt replaced certainty. Through it all, Rex remained at Daniel's side. The dog attended every meeting, every review session, every visit to the warehouse district. One afternoon, as investigators gathered near the same industrial area where Ethan had spent his final day, Rex suddenly stopped beside a weathered storage building. Snowflakes drifted around him. The German Shepherd stood motionless, staring toward a security camera mounted high above a loading dock. The camera had been considered inactive, forgotten, ignored. Yet investigators decided to examine it anyway. What they discovered changed everything. The camera had recorded limited footage during the period in question. Not enough to reveal every answer, but enough to confirm that key assumptions about the case had been wrong from the beginning. The revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. For Daniel, the moment felt almost unreal. Weeks earlier, everyone believed the story had ended. Now the truth was finally beginning to emerge. That evening, Chief Bennett addressed a gathering of officers inside the department briefing room. Snow tapped softly against the windows while dozens of men and women listened in complete silence. "We cannot change the past," he said, "but we can honor it with honesty." Daniel glanced down at Rex. The German shepherd sat calmly beside him. For the first time since Ethan's passing, the tension that had haunted the dog seemed slightly lighter. Not gone, just lighter. As though somewhere deep inside, he understood that his partner's voice was finally being heard again. 1 year later, spring returned to Cedar Ridge. The snow had melted from the mountains, and the pine trees surrounding St. Matthew's Church stood bright green beneath a clear Colorado sky. The town had changed in small ways since Ethan Walker's passing. New officers joined the department. Storefronts repainted their windows. Children who once waved at Ethan and Rex on patrol had grown a little taller. Life moved forward as it always does. Yet some memories remained woven into the fabric of the community. On a quiet Saturday morning, families gathered near the town memorial park where a new bronze statue had been unveiled. It showed a police officer standing beside a German shepherd, both facing forward with calm determination. Beneath it rested a simple plaque honoring service, loyalty, and truth. People arrived carrying flowers. Some wore dress uniforms. Others came in jeans and work boots. They stood together beneath the warm sunlight, sharing stories about Ethan, stories about kindness, about late-night calls answered without complaint, about a man who remembered names, birthdays, and small details that made people feel seen. Daniel Brooks stood near the front of the crowd. Time had softened the grief, but never erased it. He looked older now, a little more reflective. Beside him sat Rex. The German shepherd's muzzle had begun turning gray. His movements were slower than before, yet his amber eyes remained steady, attentive, wise. When the ceremony ended and the crowd slowly dispersed, Rex did something that caused several people to stop and watch. Without command, he walked toward the statue. He climbed the small stone platform and sat beside the bronze figure of Ethan. Then he rested his head gently against the officer's sculpted boot. The park fell silent. A breeze moved through the trees overhead. Wind chimes from a nearby porch drifted across the afternoon air. Nobody interrupted him. Nobody called him away. Daniel simply stood and watched. For several minutes, Rex remained there, peaceful, content, as though a journey that began long ago had finally reached its destination. The investigation had ultimately brought clarity to questions that once haunted the department. Ethan's work had been honored. The overlooked details had been acknowledged. Truth had found its place. Yet none of those things seemed to matter to Rex in that moment. He was not thinking about reports or evidence or recognition. He was simply sitting beside his partner one more time, the same way he had done for 7 years. The same way he had done through joy, hardship, long shifts, and quiet mornings. As the sun drifted lower over Cedar Ridge, casting golden light across the memorial, Daniel noticed something he had not seen since before Ethan was gone. Rex closed his eyes, not in exhaustion, not in sadness, in peace, the kind that arrives when a promise has finally been kept. Around him, life continued. Children laughed in the distance. Birds moved through the branches. The town breathed and carried on. But beneath the warm glow of the evening sky, an old German shepherd remained beside the man he loved, reminding everyone who passed that some partners never truly leave us. They stay in the lessons they taught, the lives they touched, and the quiet acts of loyalty that continue long after the world believes the story has ended. And in that gentle silence, beneath the watchful mountains and the fading light, Grace finally came home.